Later, when I was older and knew Eddie Kendricks better, he asked me persistently, and usually out of left field, if I had been having an affair with Berry Gordy during my teenage years.
Hello, Black Hole. See this brother win, man. Hey, look, what is it, win, babe? What is it, win, babe?
Well, hello there, love bugs. Hello there, Bellas. If you have not already done so, please remember to like, share to Facebook, subscribe, and visit uptopbeauty.com. Today's looky would be our Michelle Red Lip. And if you are not already a part of our book club, please hit the Patreon link below and or the join button here on the YouTube. And for a monthly fee of $5, you babies, yes you, can be privy to all the shenanigans before the YouTube gets it, if the YouTube gets it. Now, the most salacious book we have ever read. Ever! Now, it's a Motown book, y'all, but hold on to your stockings because, baby, this book is everything. Deliver Us from Temptation, the tragic and shocking story of the Temptations and Motown by Tony Turner. Man. Later, when I was older and knew Eddie Kendricks better, he asked me persistently, and usually out of left field, if I had been having an affair with Berry Gordy during my teenage years. He told me that he and several other Motowners had often wondered about it. They were so perverse that none of them could see why else Berry would have accepted me as an insider. Sometime later, the shoe would be on the other foot when some of the same people would ask me whether or not and for how long I had been having an affair with Eddie Kendricks. Back in the day, it would be certain gays that were allowed to be around all the street dudes. Now, I knew later on that part of the reason why these boys were accepted were, one, because they grew up with the young men, and two, somebody in that clique was fucking that little boy, okay? Or he was a booster. So despite the ultra wholesome image of Motown concocted by Berry Gordy, sometimes it seemed as if the company was just one big bed, which naturally led to quite a few fights and an occasional firing. Like when Martha Reeves discovered that the band member she was going with was also going with one of her Vandellas ninjas. Now that's a dirty dick. You know how I be like DDMF? And y'all be like, what is a DDMF? That ninja is a DDMF. How you going to be hunching the lead singer and one of her Vandellas? Suddenly there was a new Vandella. Wives who were left at home while their husbands fooled around on the road got jealous too. Any woman who got near Eddie Kendricks was warned to stay away because Eddie's wife, Pat, was intensely suspicious. "I'll cut your thing off," she'd warned Eddie. And since he figured she probably would, he stayed pretty much to himself. Nevertheless, Eddie did manage the odd extramarital affair. In the early years of Motown, according to Flo, he and Diana had been secretly involved. Flo told me about Eddie and Diana and about how close they had been for a period. But she said in the end, Diana told her that though Eddie looked like the man of every woman's dreams, his emotions were very guarded. Let me tell you what I read, okay? That one time Diana was so caught up into Eddie Kendricks that Diana had went to one of Eddie Kendricks' houses, but he wasn't there. Somebody else was there. She ran over to the man's house not knowing if his wife was there and started a ruckus. Luckily, the woman wasn't there because old Pat would have came out and probably pop the Diana. Like I said, she ain't scared to fight. I will give it to her. I just don't think she got hands. The exception was Eddie's wife, Pat, who was never one to mince words. Okay? So he was affectionate and loving towards Pat. Okay? Because that probably was his mama. If Flo called Eddie Kendricks a mama's boy, their wife has to either be subservient to the mother or be able to replace the mother. Okay? Hence the Marvin Gaye. That's the biggest mama boy at Motown. You hear me? Gordy hated outsiders, outside lawyers and accountants, interviewers, hanger-ons, and he loved fines. Some of the groups even fined themselves. Otis Williams fined members of Temptations for lateness, drinking, and dope, while Paul Williams took on the task of levying fines for on-stage transgressions like messing up a dance step or going on in badly pressed stage outfit. What? Bitch, you my co-worker, not my employee. And ain't Paul Williams the drunk of the group? How you gonna find me, bro? You drunk? Motown had a variety of ways to keep its stars totally in the company's control. Besides the fines and the exclusions of outsiders, the most obvious was the way Motown set itself up to take care of every aspect of an artist's business, from booking and management to recording, artist development, legal representation, and accounting. Some of those performers never saw a tax return while they were with the company. It was all taken care of for them. It wasn't until 1977 when ex-Supreme Mary Wilson filed a complaint against the company for conflict of interest that I started looking more closely at Motown's star-making system, and it became clear to me that there had been something very wrong in the company, assuming so many roles. Motown virtually acted as a bank for its artists. The Temps, for instance, were given an advance of $500 a week each against their earnings from royalties and live performances. If they needed to buy anything, all they had to do was let Motown know, and the money would be released. If the Temps were on tour and one of their wives needed money, she would go to Motown and tell them, "My kid needs new shoes," or "the mortgage is due," and it would be paid. All of these experiences were deducted from the artist's royalties account, as were the expenses incurred on tours, including all the extras, lavished on the stars, limos, champagne, first-class hotel suites, and the like. The Temps were never given any written statements showing what they had earned or spent. Some, however, were beginning to balk at the system. David, definitely the most worldly of the five Temptations, wanted more control. And although several of the artists were able songwriters, including David, they were never allowed to write or produce their own material. I never knew that. If that's the case, he full of shiz, because he allowed Smokey Robinson to do that. But when you think about it, that's a way for him to control more money. Ooh, if I let him write his own song, then he gonna ask me for more money. I'm not fitting to get that nigga more money. I got too many bitches over here that I gotta take care of. Ooh, that berry bed bug bite. It was a form of dependency that was starting to chafe as the money rolled in and survival became less of an issue. David also wanted a say in the business end of his career. "It's my effing money," he'd say. "Nobody controls my money. F that. Always take care of you, shiz. Gordy better take care of me now." As I got to know David over the years, I found out that by the time he was 14, he had already been on stage for 8 years singing spirituals and was ready to leave home and go out on the road. When he was in grade school, he sang with Mahalia Jackson. There was a lot about his early childhood that David kept from people, but I did know that he came from a very poor family in Meridian, Mississippi, that his mother had died while he was a baby, and that he was raised by his abusive father, a hell and a brimstone Southern preacher, his brother Jimmy and a sister, and later by a stepmother. Later in Memphis, David joined the Dixie Nightingales and traveled with them for a time doing the gospel circuit. He switched to pop when he heard Sam Cooke, then got a lesson in the star persona when he appeared on the same talent show as Elvis Presley in Arkansas. By the time he arrived in Michigan, David was still a teenager, but had more behind him than all the other Temptations put together. In fact, next to David, the 4 other Temptations were like newborn babies. David had already been scraped hard, which was probably why he was the first Temptation to start looking at what was going on and to demand to be treated like an adult. And yet, perhaps Otis was smarter. He bided his time, asked no questions, stayed in Barry's good books, walked on good terms with Barry, and kept a firm grip on his leadership role in what had become the world's #1 black male recording group. In late 1966, the Temps were way up on the A-list. All through that year and the next, the Temptations were riding high on hit after hit. When in late 1966, the group failed to make a big hit on the pop charts with Smokey's Get Ready, featuring Eddie on lead, Motown didn't waste any time. It gave another young and hopeful writer, producer, the privilege of working with the Temps. This was Norman Whitfield, a longtime fan of the Primes who'd been waiting for just such an opportunity to show Gordy what he could do. The lead singer for most of the songs, and as far as he was concerned, he was a real singer who could sing in any key, whereas Diana's voice only sounded good when it was carefully packaged. When David told me about his idea after rehearsal one day, he sounded quite positive that David Ruffin and the Temptations featuring Eddie Kendricks would be acceptable. He said he was planning to talk to Wanda Rogers about the name of her group being changed to Wanda Young and the Marvelettes, so there would be some uniformity in these names. I asked him, what about the Four Tops? But he said they couldn't change their names because it would have to be Levi Stubbs and the Three Tops, or else they would have to bring in an extra singer to make it 4. And then you had Martha and the Vandellas, Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, Junior Walker and the All-Stars. It made perfect sense to him. It makes perfect sense to me too. But brother, it's more than goddamn one lead singer in that motherfucker. It's 3. I don't know. Like what they said in the Temptations movie, no member is bigger than the group. I mean, okay. Or was that the New Edition movie? I don't know. I can't because it's the same damn story. David had been quickly making enemies at Motown. His suggestions that the Temptations' name be changed to reflect his lead position created fury both within and outside the group. Eddie didn't like the idea one bit. As he said, why not have it changed to Eddie Kendricks and the Temptation? Otis just tossed out the idea as if it was totally absurd. The nigga who sang the least. Yes, he's an important member of the damn Temptations, but how you let the ninja that do the least control you? Shoot, was y'all scared of him? I know Davy Ruffin wasn't scared of him, because that ninja act like he would fight a bear. The whole name issue also added to David's growing reputation as an egomaniac. As time went by, all the Temptations' egos grew fast, which wasn't surprising given that each had his own little army and ass-kissers running behind him and telling him he was a star. And of course, each had his wife or lover or buddy telling him, honey, you should get more to do. Darling, it isn't fair. Why is David doing all that? Why did Eddie get that lead? Why don't they give you more? Because Melvin and Otis don't do that. That's not their job. They do the background. That's what they do. They all had their fans and followers, but David's were the ones that Motown really objected to. Eddie was always very careful not to publicly associate with people who were outwardly questionable, but David hung out with whomever he felt like hanging out with, and they were not people that Motown wanted around their stars. People like Eddie Bush and a handsome hanger-on named Royce, who spent most of his time trying to talk David up into the biggest star you could ever imagine. There was another problem. While several performers at Motown experimented with drugs during the late 60s and many more drank, David was quickly turning into a hardcore user. He had started with marijuana and alcohol. It was rare to see him go on stage without first downing half a tumbler of gin and soda. Now he was into snorting cocaine and taking pills too. The alcohol got him on stage. The coke kept the excitement level up after the performance, and the pills helped him wind down when finally he wanted to get some sleep. The result of all these drugs put together with David's feelings that he was irreplaceable was that he started showing up late, missing performances, and generally acting like a superstar instead of a team player, as Otis puts it. At the same time, David had started making louder and louder noises about Motown. Many Motown artists had woken up when they saw what happened to Florence Ballard. Despite so many million-selling records, she did not leave with her pockets lined. But besides, by late 1967, Motown had become a very different place. It had become a large corporation headed predominantly by hard-nosed white executives who had very little feel for interest in the music and didn't care who had helped out in the old days. The bottom line was the bottom line. So there was not much love lost between the artists and Motown. But David was the only one, apart from Martha Reeves, who came out openly against the company and not only battled against the paternalist system, but also questioned its credibility. When the group met in private, you'd hear Eddie saying things like, "My real daddy wouldn't do me like this," and they'd all dog Big Daddy Gordy. According to David, that's when Motown began to campaign openly against him. At first, the campaign centered around David's apparent ego problems and his live-in relationship with Tammy Terrell, a beautiful young girl who had come to Motown in 1965 after an unsuccessful and harrowing stint as a background singer with James Brown Revue.
Right.